David Turk, Deputy Secretary for the Department of Energy, will be joining us in about 12 seconds, soon as he puts on those headphones. How you doing?
Good. Sorry to be a few minutes late.
Oh, it's no problem. I'm glad that you're here. Again, can you introduce yourself briefly to our listening audience? David Turk, Deputy Secretary, Department of Energy. What does that mean?
Yeah, so the Department of Energy does a lot of things. We do energy. We do more and more clean energy, which is great, especially with the president's historic Inflation Reduction Act and bipartisan infrastructure legislation. Literally $100 billion of grant money going through our department to try to help lower costs, to try to help make more affordable heat pumps and EVs and all these new clean energy technologies. But we also have a huge national lab apparatus, 17 national labs across the country, which is a big deal in terms of the innovation in science, not just for energy, but science more generally. And then the Department of Energy also is where our nuclear weapons are refurbished and kept up to date.
I heard it once said that energy is economics, like your economy and energy, they go together. What does that mean? Can you talk a little bit more about the economic implications of energy and how energy is at the core of the economic infrastructure, particularly for industrialized societies?
So energy literally powers our societies, right? You don't get modern economies without energy. And what we're trying to do with this administration is make sure that that's affordable energy, right? Energy is a huge portion of what we all pay for. And lower income folks, unfortunately, pay an even higher percentage of their money that they earn on a monthly basis to energy. And we're trying to reduce those costs of energy for everybody and make energy affordable. Energy is also a great thing, but if you burn fossil fuels to get energy, you get emissions, particulate matter, and other kinds of not only greenhouse gases, but also local pollutants. So that's a big focus of this administration, especially for those fence line, frontline communities, to where everybody deserves to have clean air. Everybody deserves to have an environment where kids don't get asthma and cancer and other kinds of things as well. So we're spending an awful lot of time making sure that we're doing energy the right way. We're having it be clean energy. There's a clean energy revolution happening in our country right now, which is incredibly exciting, and focused on those frontline communities, environmental justice, energy justice, really doubling down, tripling down on those efforts.
I have a theory. I'm wondering your thoughts. In my mind, I envision this backroom rumble between the old energy barons requiring fossil fuels and oil, to be specific, versus this new emerging energy empire that's going to drive AI, electromagnetic, things of that nature. Is that a fantasy, or is there really kind of a tussle as the world is changing the way it energizes itself for the economy?
Yeah, so there's definitely incumbent energy interests, right? There are companies that have built up billions and billions of dollars for years and years and decades, right? And anytime you have incumbent industries that have those economic interests so firmly entrenched, there's no doubt that some of them will push back, and some of them will see new clean energy technologies, solar, wind, EVs, displacing the amount of oil that we have to produce here in our country or import, or natural gas for that matter. So there's no doubt there's incumbent interests. I think what you've seen from this administration, one of the reasons I'm really proud to be the deputy secretary, the number 2 in the department right now, is energy is a good thing, but emissions are a bad thing. And so let's look technology by technology and get the most benefits we can out of different technologies, first and foremost for Americans and people, real people's lives, right? Affordability, the pollution issue for real people's lives, and be very pragmatic in terms of what gets the most benefits and what has the least amount of harm. And what we're seeing now more and more is, as we put more solar on, as we get more wind in the system, as we develop other clean energy technologies, right now 4% of our electricity is generated by solar in our country. Thanks to the president's leadership, that's actually going to go up to 7% in just 2 years. Now 7% is still a small amount, but it's a lot bigger than 4% going forward in that end. And you're starting to see some major industries, major job creators in the clean energy space. Right. So it's not just like energy incumbents here and a bunch of startups here. It's some big companies. In fact, we've seen, just if you look at EVs and battery manufacturing, we've seen over $160 billion of private investments that's been leveraged by what the government's doing. That is a lot of jobs all across the country, a lot of economic opportunity across the country, all in a clean energy space that doesn't have that baggage associated with the emissions and the asthma and the other pollutants.
Real quick on that, how is or should that reality impact the way we're preparing the future workforce? Because it doesn't seem like it's impacting the public schools in my city in the way that it should be. If the economy is shifting that way, education doesn't seem to be shifting that way.
So we're trying to do it as quickly as we can because there are huge economic opportunities. If someone wants to have a stable job and an opportunity going forward, become an electrician, right? Become a part of a growing clean energy economy as opposed to other parts of the energy economy that aren't going to grow and likely are going to shrink over a period of time. But we've got to be smart and intentional about not only in high school and college, but also all the way to grade school to make sure that everybody knows that there are these opportunities out there. So we try to do an awful lot of that. I think we need to do even more of that. One of the things our Office of Science has done, Asmarit Berhays, the head of that office, she's just done a remarkable job of really going to historically Black colleges and universities, other minority serving institutions, having internship programs, being very intentional about making sure that these economic opportunities are out there. A number of our labs work in the high school and even K through 8. But we need to double down and triple down and do even more of that because if you're not aware of these economic opportunities, if you're not aware of these jobs because your dad or your mom or other relatives are in this industry, then you're not going to even know that's a possibility from a career progression. So we're doing a lot. I've had a chance to travel with the First Lady a few times, who's very invested in this, especially from the community college issue, with Vice President Harris, who's been an incredible leader on these issues. But there's no doubt we need to do even more in that space.
So back in the oil economy days, there was a boom, everybody is getting rich, like you said, and then all of a sudden this thing, carbon emissions and it's killing the world becomes a thing. So now we're moving into this artificial intelligence, electromagnetic based. Are there concerns? Is there research being done now that looks at the potential harms that an electromagnetic kind of emissions can cause? And where are we in that thinking? Because I would hate to go 20 years from now and realize that, something's happening to my brain because we're AI.
So we've got to absolutely be smart about this and thinking ahead on these issues. There's no doubt to me, given how much harm is already being caused around not only our country, but around the world by climate change, that we have to take that head on. I feel incredibly proud to be part of an administration, this president, this vice president, who said climate change is an issue. It's a big issue. We got to deal with it. Let's move head on and let's get our emissions down and work with other countries around the world to reduce emissions going forward. But we need to be smart about what replaces it and what challenges there are with that. So a few thoughts on that. One is we need to make sure the new clean energy technologies are affordable, right? This isn't clean and clean and affordable, right? Like it can't just be clean and it can't just be affordable. It needs to be clean and affordable. And if it's only rich people who can afford clean energy technologies, that's not good enough. Mm-hmm. And so this administration, through a lot of what we're doing with these extraordinary pieces of legislation, is offering tax incentive. We've got home rebates that will be not only 50%, but upwards of 80% for lower income folks so that they can afford heat pumps, right? So instead of having to heat your home with natural gas, you can do it through electricity, and there are a lot of benefits from that. Efficiency benefits, cost benefits. So affordability is absolutely key. And then the other thing we really need to watch out for is any intended or unintended consequences. Right, as we have more electrification, as we have more EVs coming onto the grid, as we have more heat pumps coming onto the grid, does that offer up an opportunity for either nation states or bad actors to hack into those and to bring the grids down, right? That is not what we need to have. That is what we need to be prepared against. And so the way people talk about it in cybersecurity is the more your grids encompass smart demand response and EVs and heat pumps, the surface area increases about what you need to protect from cyber criminals, but also nation states. And so we have a whole office focused on that and making sure that we're building in resilience, building in cybersecurity by design so that we make sure that we have that protected. The other part that we're spending a lot of time on is the supply chains, right? Mm-hmm. We don't want to have clean energy technologies and all the supply chain coming from China or other countries that are challenging in terms of their human rights, challenging in terms of their willingness to use energy as just like what we saw Putin using energy as a weapon against Europe when Russia invaded Ukraine, and then he shut off the gas spigot, which caused a lot of challenge in the rest of Europe. We need diverse supply chains and not all of our critical minerals being processed in China, which a lot of them are right now.
So on that note, of course, it was clear when we had an oil-based economy, America was going across the globe looking for places that had oil, and there are implications to that, right? I'm assuming as we're looking at different energy sources, it requires different minerals, different compounds, and drilling and mining. How will that impact, continents like Africa or the places that we source this from? I'm concerned that as we move to the clean side here, it has dirty implications in other places. How are you all thinking about
So
that?
this is what's so exciting if we do this right and don't screw it up, right, and learn the lessons of history. So I've had a chance to not only in Africa, but Latin America and some other places as well. I was in South Africa and Ghana last year. I'll go back to Kenya and Tanzania this year. There are a lot of countries with mineral wealth. What's exciting is if it's not just them mining in a responsible way that's good for their population, which, there's some partnerships that we're working on that front, but there's an opportunity for them to move up the value chain, right? I met with a minister from Mauritania, which is in the northwest part of the continent. And right now they export a lot of steel. They also have a huge amount of solar potential. And their plan is, and we're going to work with them to help them, is they can tap into that solar resource, make clean hydrogen that then allows them to make clean steel, do it in Mauritania instead of just shipping off the raw steel somewhere else.
Okay.
They get more of the value add by moving up that supply chain, and then Europe and others will pay a premium for the clean steel as opposed to steel that's used with fossil fuels creating it. So it's a win from a clean global perspective, but it's also can be a win for moving up the supply chain and getting more of that economic benefit for countries. The other part too is a lot of countries who aren't producing oil or gas are dependent on whatever the global market rate is, and we've seen huge fluctuations. And when the price of oil spikes, it's not only rich countries who get burdened by that, and that causes inflation in our country, but the poorest of the world's countries get screwed even more because it's a higher price and they pay more of their income for commodities. So if these countries have more solar, if they have more wind that they control, that they create, they control more of their destiny. So it's a win-win if we're able to work with countries around the world on that front.
My last question for you, as we're moving towards smart cities and all of the stuff that we envisioned with the Jetsons, right? That city. What are the energy implications that concern you as major cities are moving towards this smart city model?
So one of the biggest areas of concern, and I've had a chance to travel out to Washington State and to the California and the Bay Area, is artificial intelligence. And you mentioned that a few times. Artificial intelligence uses a lot of energy.
Yeah.
Right. It uses a lot of energy, more and more chips, more and more data centers. Meeting with Microsoft, meeting with Google, meeting with OpenAI and others, their additional electricity use per year is quite significant. Now they're making some efficiency improvements, right? Making it more and more efficient over time. But there's a lot more electricity. The opportunity there is a lot of those companies are leading by bringing on solar, bringing on wind, bringing on other kinds of clean energy technologies. So we just need to partner with them, make sure that that increased electricity demand is brought on by these new clean energy resources, and that we're equitable about how those energy resources are shared, right?
This is really my last question. As you were speaking, I was thinking, whatever happened to nuclear? There was a moment when nuclear energy was supposed to take over and be everything. I know it's still around, but nobody talks about nuclear energy anymore. Where is it? What's the state of nuclear?
So we talk about it, and we've got a lot of phenomenal talent working on it. And it's not just the nuclear that people think of, these huge plants, huge gigawatt level scale plants. We're working on something called small modular reactors, which are smaller reactors. Some of the waste issues aren't as significant, and we're hoping that we can bring down the costs. So we're working on that technology right now, and making some important strides in that. And we think that's an incredibly important part of the overall mix to get us the energy resources we need. The other area that is getting more and more attention, including by private sector investors, is fusion.
Okay. Right.
So right now, nuclear that we have online in these small modular reactors are fission. Fusion is the promise of unlimited amounts of energy with hydrogen and fusing atoms instead of dividing atoms. We've been working on fusion for quite some time. We had a major breakthrough last year in one of our national laboratories out in California, where for the first time ever, we had an experiment where we actually got more energy out than we put into it. Right. The National Ignition Facility is what people can Google if they want to see what happened on that end. There's about $6 billion plus private investment right now into fusion, different kinds of fusion. Now, this is not going to come online tomorrow or next week or even a few years from now. But if we make a concerted effort, if we do the investment now, and again, importantly, invest in people who can be part of this fusion experiment, that could be a big deal too.
So is it safe to say that as energy goes, the world economy goes?
I think it's incredibly important for the world economy. And this is why it's so important to make it clean, make it affordable, make it equitable, make sure everyone benefits from it. And so this is why we are incredibly purposeful in this administration, doing community benefits plans when we have these new battery manufacturing and these new facilities to make sure the communities and the people who live in those communities benefit. Why Justice 40 is so important to us, right? So that the benefits of all this federal investment flow to everybody. And as you started your line of questioning, it all starts with the people, right? Like if we have people from all walks of life, all parts of our community who are part of our department, part of this overall effort, we're going to succeed that much more. And that's why we're spending so much time on the K through 8, the internships, the economic opportunities for small and disadvantaged businesses, and making sure that they know that there's this money in economic opportunity. So couldn't agree with you more.
I'm a little bit over time, but I need to ask this question. I would get in trouble if I didn't. In all of this, how do we protect? We come from Philly, and 20 miles down the road is a city called Chester. And Chester has been inundated with a lot of toxic runoff, all kind of environmental issues. As we move into this energy space, how do we make sure that small, disadvantaged Black cities, Black residents don't get the cast off and the runoff and the emissions dumped into the spaces where they live?
So this is why we have to be intentional about all the challenges that these communities. I grew up in a steel mill community in a small town in Illinois, a very polluted place, and the steel mill was closing down my entire childhood. So this is something that I take incredibly personally. I know our president does as well, and others. Our secretaries from Michigan, and saw what the auto challenges while she was governor had in those communities. So we need to be honest with ourselves at the scale of the challenge. I'm not sure all our fellow Americans appreciate just the challenges you're mentioning, not only in communities around Philadelphia, but communities who have borne the brunt of economic progress for the rest of us, but they're bringing the brunt of it with increased asthma, increased cancer rates, increased other challenges along those lines. And being intentional with when we spend federal taxpayer money, let's go above and beyond to make sure that the communities that need that funding the most on the clean energy technologies and the clean energy side get the challenge, get the opportunities that come from that, and to think through the full environmental footprint of those industries, those new clean energy industries, so we don't screw up again. We're smarter this time, and we make sure that we take advantage of what we've learned in the past and intentional about going forward. But this is where we can't bury our heads in the sand and just pretend that everything's great and everything's going to be great. We've got to be very intentional and purposeful. And to me, it all comes back to the people, right? The more we're able to hire up folks from communities X, Y, and Z who know this and breathe this and live this inside and out, unfortunately, the more they're going to be the decision makers within our department. Right. Political appointees, civil servants, we've got some phenomenal talent, but we need to make sure that our department looks like the rest of America, comes from all walks of life, because then we'll be intentional and purposeful, and we'll do what we need to do, just as you're saying.
David, Turk Deputy Secretary, Department of Energy. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us today. Word on Democracy.